Board riders found a man face down in the surf soon after 9, 2 kilometres north of the patrolled area on Lakes Beach on the Central Coast.
They rolled and a lot of water was going through him and that, and you know, he's pretty heavy, and with the waves coming through it's pretty hard to bring him in.
The board riders were unable to revive the man. Ambulance officers also worked on the swimmer without success. It's believed he suffered a heart attack in the water. The tragedy has prompted a warning from lifeguards. All swimmers are advised to swim within the flags close to emergency first aid services. The lifesavers believe on-the-spot action could have saved the man, who was aged in his 60s.
His chances would have been a lot greater of surviving if he was here, because we've got an oxyvivor and that, and we're all trained in CPR.
Police are yet to positively identify the man.
It looks at this stage he could be a tourist of the area.
This is the second death in 2 days on an unpatrolled beach. 54-year-old Dennis Moynihan from the Blue Mountains was pulled unconscious from the surf on Bluey's Beach on the mid-north coast yesterday. He died last night in the John Hunter Hospital. Peter Ryan, NBN News. The English pairing of Wilson and Norris won the first heat at the Newcastle Motordrome, but that was their peak. The Aussies charged at the British to regain the lead, but their victory was marred by an incident in the 10th heat. Australia's Tony Langdon clipped the rear wheel of Englishman Wilson, sending both crashing heavily into the concrete wall. The visitor was taken to hospital with possible back injuries. Langdon was not seriously hurt. The Aussies now have 3 test wins after 3 clashes and an unassailable lead in the best of 5 series.
Intense activity this afternoon at Saltash with a barrage of water bombing by 2 helicopters to stop the latest fire front. Flames, fanned by strong westerly winds, advanced toward a new housing estate after racing across another strip of Hunter Water Corporation land. Country Fire Authority volunteers now based in the area were ready for the onslaught and met the fiery challenge head-on. The battle lasted several hours, the Victorian firefighters successfully defending the home units. However, heat and smoke affected the firefighters. They needed ambulance attention as the afternoon progressed. Residents from the estate and the neighbouring Banksia Grove village were evacuated to the William Town Hall to allow for the firefighting operation. Motorists once again found themselves stranded as the main roads to Port Stephens were cut. Deputy Fire Controller Ian Nowacki has appealed for residents to keep off the roads and people not needing to be in the emergency zone to stay away.
Well, we're asking all people that are travelling, if they don't have to go anywhere, people just go if they have to go anywhere along these roads. Otherwise, please stay off them to give the emergency services any access that they need, because the congestion can mean a life.
Late this afternoon, a blaze burning behind the Banksia Grove village had been contained with no homes lost. While firefighters were being kept busy with blazes near Williamtown Air Force Base and Madawi, the front bounded by Grahamstown Dam and Anna Bay had been contained. So far, the Port Stephens fire has consumed about 5,000 hectares of bush and grassland in the space of a week. Gary Blair, NBN News.
The fire threatening the villages of Wollombi and Laguna near Cessnock began more than a week ago in Howes Valley. It's burnt out several thousand hectares of remote bushland and is now posing a danger to property. Brigades can't really get near the fire front, it's too big and dangerous, but it's being monitored and firebombed from the air.
So I've certainly never seen a fire like this. We're talking about something over a 50k front. Okay, it's incredible. It's incredible.
At Bushfire Control, weary volunteers are rested and fed and sent out again to backburn and clear around property. They are well aware of the task ahead of them. Police have requested that properties around Laguna, Blackslands Arm, Wollombi and Stockyard Creek be evacuated. Many are on ridge lines and surrounded by dry bush. Some have heeded the warnings and have registered at a disaster centre at the Wollombi Hall. Others are more determined to fight it out. Everyone here in Wollombi is on standby. It's a matter of waiting to see if the fire will make it this far, and if it does, how fierce it will be. A short time ago, the fire was around 5 kilometres from the villages. Further northwest, another big blaze is threatening property around Wombo, Bulga, Milbradale, Walkworth and Apple Tree Flat. There are reports of houses being lost as the fire approaches the valley floor. Evacuations are also being carried out there. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
All details on road closures are on the number 008 227 228 or Sydney 02 332 9344. If you need details on evacuations, the number is Sydney 02 968 0999. And if you wish to help the Red Cross fire appeal, the Red Cross will gratefully accept donations on 008 812 028.
Fires continue to burn in the region, but they are being brought under control. In Lake Macquarie, Army troops and heavy artillery are lending support to volunteer brigades in the Watagan Mountains. It's the main blaze still causing concern in the lake area.
The situation is quite stable here. The weather conditions are looking better for us, and we've been able to concentrate on cleaning up around the areas where we had running fires.
While the operation is being scaled down, volunteers are on standby in case the situation flares. Many of these people have foregone their annual family holiday to fight these fires.
Probably starting to strain the relationship a bit, but they realise what's going on, so they understand.
In Lake Macquarie and the Hunter, the damage bill is still unclear. Few residences have been destroyed. The greatest casualties are our native animals. Thousands have been killed in the last week. Members of the Native Animal Trust Fund are scouring blackened bushland for injured animals. The fires have also disrupted the plans of many travellers. Newcastle Police Citizens Youth Club was turned into a makeshift home for about 300 people who were stranded when the freeway was closed. Dora Gordon and her husband left Brisbane almost 48 hours ago, bound for Sydney. Their coach could get no further than Doyleson on the Central Coast. Instead, they spent last night here on the floor.
Well, at first I thought, I've never done that before. I feel like a refugee, but I slept wonderfully well.
The Salvation Army is providing food for hundreds of people left stranded on the coast and in the Hunter. Despite the disruption, there's enormous goodwill. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Recuperating in a small enclosure for 2 weeks hasn't been much fun for Eric. The 40-year-old croc is one of the largest in captivity, and he's now back in the water. Eric, who lives at the Australian Reptile Park at Gosford, is recovering from an operation to remove part of his hind leg after he'd had a fight with another croc at another park. Eric's fan club was happy to see their idol again, especially in such good health.
Well, he looks well. I'm very, very pleased with the way the wound looks. Another week or two with getting in and out of the pool and the pressure that's going to be put onto the wound will tell the story, but at this stage, 90% happy.
Also today, the yearly adrenaline rush for park workers recovering alligator eggs from a rather broody mother. "50 eggs were collected. They'll be used for research and also hatched artificially indoors. If the eggs were allowed to hatch naturally, the little fellas could possibly escape under the fence, and neighbours wouldn't appreciate that." Peter Ryan, NBN News. The fire swept through Somersby on the Central Coast on Saturday, destroying at least 5 homes. 10 others have also gone in the region, shattering people's lives, leaving many families destitute. More than 6,000 people were evacuated when the flames were at their doors.
A lot of people are still in shock and still processing just what has occurred. It's happened so quickly, and they're coming to terms with what they need to do to get their lives back to normal.
The Disaster Recovery Centre at Gosford has not stopped taking calls since the weekend. The centre can coordinate a new roof over a family's head, food, clothing, even a tradesperson for repair work.
People are focusing on what they need at the moment to get their lives back into normality.
Working with Social Security, disaster relief payments can also be made of up to $2,000. If you need help on the Central Coast, the number to call is 236 547 during office hours. Meanwhile, the stop-start situation continues with the F3 freeway, the main link between Newcastle and Sydney. Late this afternoon, traffic heading north was reduced to 1 lane due to backburning. All southbound traffic was running freely. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
Shortland Electricity loses around $1.25 million a year through people using a range of methods to obtain free power.
This person here was devised this situation up in his garage, so of a daytime he'd flick those switches on and then all the electricity would be running through the house as normal. Of a night time he'd come in his garage, he'd turn that off, he'd put these 2 black switches on, and that meant that the whole of his house was running on the free.
Not only does tampering with meters cost Shortland Electricity and consumers money, it is also dangerous, placing lives and property at risk. The 4-week amnesty beginning today is aimed at eliminating these problems.
We will then make sure that they're paying the correct amount of electricity from now on and ensure that their family, anyone else that may come in contact with their house, is safe.
People who own up will escape prosecution. They can telephone in confidence to 1800 60412. This is the blanket of smoke and fog which covered the western side of Lake Macquarie and Newcastle for most of the day. It was reported as far west as Muswellbrook, and at Singleton visibility was just 500 metres. The weather experts say it's a temperature inversion layer.
Quite simply, a layer of cooler air trapped underneath a layer of warmer air, which is the opposite to normal, and today looked worse than usual because of the smoke haze and also some fog.
Apart from calls about the smoke haze, control rooms around the region were relatively quiet. In Lake Macquarie and Newcastle, backburning operations have been completed and brigades are on standby to meet any future emergency. Weather-wise, that could occur close to the weekend.
Forecasts aren't very good. There are conditions are deteriorating. The winds are going to change around, and there's an indication that towards the weekend that the conditions will deteriorate somewhere along the lines they were earlier on in the fires.
There are still a number of fires in the valley, including this blaze at Giro near Gloucester. It's expected to be under control by tomorrow. Rain is falling over the Barrington Tops tonight. That's expected to help ease the situation. Meanwhile, volunteers working from Singleton have established backburns stretching for 90 kilometres from Jerry's Plains to Milbradale. They've also built breaks around the Putty area to safeguard properties from a big blaze on Gosford Mountain. In Port Stephens, it was also quiet today. Officers hoping it's not the calm before the storm. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
It was hot work with the first grapes to be used by Mount Pleasant to make a champagne-style wine. Grapes for champagne are usually picked earlier because they don't need the sweetness a few weeks extra on the vine would produce. But even these grapes are ready to harvest ahead of schedule. Winemaker Phil Ryan attributes this to the hot weather.
This has been brought on by the incessant heat since Christmas, and this sort of heat really ripens the grapes very quickly.
Once picked, the grapes are crushed, the stalks and leaves are separated and the juice stored at a cool temperature. Phil Ryan says the hot weather will mean fewer grapes will be harvested, but those that are should produce an excellent vintage.
If you look back 3 years ago, 1991 had some similarity to this year. It was quite a hot, dry growing season. Not the winds we have this year, but a very dry growing season, and the wines from 91 are outstanding.
While Mount Pleasant has a head start on harvesting, producing a fine drop still takes time. It will be 4 years before these grapes will be ready to drink. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Juanita Pilley of the Newcastle suburb of Gateshead hasn't seen her youngest son since he went to visit his father before Christmas. Jai's father dropped the boy and his 6-year-old nephew at the Parramatta pool on Tuesday. Some hours later, when they were due to be picked up, the 6-year-old was there. Jai was nowhere to be found.
I haven't slept since I heard the news. Even if he didn't want to come home, he'd still ring and say, "I'm not coming home, but I'm all right, don't worry about me." Sort of kid he is.
A popular boy who loved surfing and skateboarding, Jai was due to start at Gateshead High School later this month. Charlestown and Parramatta Police have joined forces in the hunt for the missing boy. Police hold grave fears for his safety.
The young boy has left the pool area of Parramatta and we don't know with whom at this point in time or whether it was alone. So we are concerned for his safety, yes.
Today, Jai's mother gave an emotional plea for anyone who's seen her son to contact police.
Jai, if you're out there, just ring me and let me know you're okay. Reverse the charges. Ring me and let me know you're all right.
Joanne Shoebridge, NBN News.
Forget the march past, beach flags and sprints, the remaining narrow strip of sand offered little more than a launch ramp for water events. A heavy swell had gouged away the beach, but had subsided enough for boat crews, boards and swimmers to compete in the club carnival. Making an appearance, the almost all-girls Nobby's boat crew. They're still looking for a sweep, but aren't shy about taking to the oars. The southerly chop had a few of the boats sideways and proved testing in board and ski events, as paddlers scrambled for those extra little boosts into the beach. Swansea, Belmont and Redhead dominated the competition with powerful performances by Jamie Jenkins and Matt McGregor. In the women's events, Merryweather's Natalie Moyer won the under-18 surf belt and came in second behind Michelle Kent in the Iron Woman. A hard-fought open surfboat final saw Caves Beach home ahead of Redhead and Merriweather. The next club carnival is at Redhead next month.
At the height of the bushfires, more than 100 RAF personnel fought a desperate battle to protect their base. It was a fight they won, and the Chief of Air Staff, Air Marshal Ian Gratian, flew in to pass on his personal thanks. The RAF personnel worked not only on fires which came within metres of the base, but also on blazes in surrounding areas like Saltash and Madawi.
Yeah, I'm very proud of them.
And when you're the Chief of Air Staff, you get your own personal aircraft. After a 2-hour visit, Air Marshal Gratian flew himself home to Canberra. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
The fierce storm and strong winds wreaked havoc in a matter of minutes. Shocked residents emerged from their homes to assess the damage.
Just like a tornado, yeah, and then we could see all the branches falling there.
The tree fell into the Rinaldi's garden, narrowly missing the house. Not so lucky John Boyle.
And then I just saw this tree just uproot and come down right in front of my very eyes. It was a very frightening experience.
It landed on the roof of his house and was quickly cleared away by the SES. The wind also snapped a tree in half, smashing this Gwendolyn garage and crushing the four-wheel drive parked under it. 18-year-old Peter Foote was visiting friends in the street and had parked his car in the neighbour's garage.
In actual fact, it was me mate suggested it, and he's just said, park it in there, protect it from the storm.
Fire and rain, two competing elements, have threatened these properties in the last fortnight. Volunteer firefighters and emergency services kept bushfires from engulfing these homes. Last night they were back again, working late into the evening, making them safe after the violent storms. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
British amateur champion Ian Pyman is one of a dozen overseas players in the championships. Lake Macquarie is one of several other tournaments, including the Australian Masters. The 20-year-old from Yorkshire will play during his 6 weeks in Australia.
This is going to be, probably my last amateur event, so I'd like to do well, especially, in Australia.
Ian has only played twice in the last month due to a wet English winter, but it's not just the weather conditions he'll have to adapt to.
In England we tend to play a lot of bumper and run along the ground, but here everything's got to be played up in the air.
Flying the Aussie flag is amateur champion Greg Chalmers. He's part of the 17-member Australian amateur squad playing the Lake Macquarie event, which is the first in a series of national qualifying tournaments for the side. This tournament is one Greg would like to clinch.
Because we've got the guys, I've spoken to a few of the Australian guys and they see it as something that's big to win because the field's so good.
Today the amateur champs eased into the competitive mode during an Ambrose day with local. Acknowledged as Australia's leading amateur 72-hole tournament, the calibre of players the event attracts continues to increase. As a reflection of this year tournament organisers had to enforce an entry handicap of 3 or better, the lowest ever acquired. The 3-day tournament starting tomorrow received record entries. The field of 220 culled from more than 300. Among the local players to watch, Belmont's Kirk Lind. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
The Communication Workers Union has released a list of post offices in the Hunter which it believes are under threat.
Post offices that are unprofitable are going to be targeted, and the postal service as we know it now will decline and will be in the future removed.
Australia Post denies a list exists. The Hunter Regional Manager was not available for comment this afternoon, but according to a spokesperson, a program of restructuring has begun in the Hunter in line with what's occurring Australia-wide. He said an agreement was reached with the union in 1992, which has allowed scores of centres around the country to be run privately without a downgrading of services. The union, though, is adamant more than 500 offices throughout the country are under serious threat, and with it the service to customers.
We are lobbying the government. We have a meeting next week with the Minister Lee, and we'll take it from there. But certainly we're not going to lie down. We're out there to make sure that the Australian people are going to have their postal service.
Belmont turned on some perfect weather for golf, although it wasn't smooth going for everyone. All 220 played the first round of 18 holes. Tomorrow's 18 holes will give another chance at making the top 80 to play in Sunday's final 36 holes.
You're looking at the very best amateur golfers in Australia and from overseas.
Recognition here is just a step away from the jump to professional for many of these golfers. On the list of past winners, Jack Newton, Wayne Grady, Roger Davis, Brett Ogle and Bruce Devlin. British amateur champion Ian Pyman was in good form. He's been billed as one of the top contenders for the title alongside Australian amateur title holder from Western Australia, Greg Chalmers. Carrying the hopes of the local contingent will be Kurt Lind and 17-year-old Trent Berry. Trent tied with Kyogle golfer Brian Penman in the New South Wales Schoolboy Championships in Sydney this week. The pair makes up the New South Wales team and will compete in the Australian Amateur Championships in Perth later this year. If you're wondering why you haven't heard of the Doug Anthony All-Stars for a while, it's because they've spent the past year in Britain.
We're all exactly the same as we were before we left, weren't we?
Oh, absolutely. Not at all, not at all. Not a little bit, not a little bit. We're still Aussie Ridgy Didge.
As well as a television series in the United Kingdom, the trio completed a 100-performance national tour, weekly segments for The Today Show, and recorded a new album, Dead or Alive. "19-year-old Katrina Griffin was comforted by boyfriend Barry Hall in Newcastle's John Hunter Hospital after her ordeal. The stallion she'd been training at their property near Cessnock attacked her soon after a training session.
And started biting my shoulder and arms and wouldn't let go. went down to my legs and then went down to my right arm.
On her own in the yard, Katrina decided the only way to free herself from the horse's grip was to feign death.
I lay down and stopped fighting him, actually sort of played dead to him. And because I wasn't fighting him anymore, he stopped fighting me. And then I was able to roll out of the yard.
Although badly injured and 3 months pregnant, she walked some distance to the farmhouse where she called the ambulance. The 5-year-old stallion had been broken in a couple of years ago but was rarely ridden. After speaking to Katrina about what happened, Barry Hall had the horse put down.
If he'd have only given one bite and walked away, fair enough, but to follow up and really mean what he was doing, it's just, you just can't trust him, so we've had to put him down.
Fortunately, Katrina's pregnancy hasn't been affected by the horse's rough treatment. Jane Anderson, NBN News.